29th of June. Soon we're going to be into the FOMO of July, the fear of missing out. This is related to cryptos and the conversion from the failing central bank fiat world into cryptocurrencies and gold and silver. I mean, it's spreading out. People also, to a certain extent, might try buying into land, but I don't know how much there's going to be of that because it's the hyperinflationary environment that the central banks are causing. And in those conditions, some land can work for you, but it's going to be really dodgy, especially with the fascist federal government here in the USA spitting out money and free rent and all of this kind of stuff. It changes the equation of how one might react to a FOMO situation. You know, like if you couldn't get cryptos, if you couldn't get gold or silver, you'd cast around and maybe you'd buy land or something, right? In the Pacific Northwest, we've noticed that you can't buy land. There's just not a lot listed. People are buying boats, collectible cars, all different kinds of things just to get out of the fiat currency, just to get their money out of money, out of currency. So, but we're in the month of July. We're going to see the FOMO, and you're going to see reports of it. It'll be more towards the end of July than at the beginning, but you'll see it throughout the entire month. There will be this gathering emotional response to the things that are going on relative to the central bank, relative to the cryptos rising. They're out of their little slump. That business is past. They're going to start heading up again. Then pretty soon the rise will become very steep. And then just as it starts to become real steep, you'll see the FOMO kick off and a lot of articles and discussion about it. But July will be the fear of missing out. So if you haven't got people into cryptos, they're going to really have a hard time coming up to speed and reacting in July. See, but you may get your friends and relatives coming to the conclusion that they have to do something. Okay, so we're in a state of irregular warfare here in the United States, right? We've been invaded by communists, communist Chinese and globalists in an alliance that was sealed in the early 70s and has been progressing ever since. They've come in through the institutions. They've captured a lot of the institutions. They've captured Congress which isn't hard. I mean, it's just bribery. Print money, give it to those stupid fools. They'll do whatever you want. They've captured the courts. Again, a lot of it is bribery or extortion. And so we're in a state of irregular warfare. That is to say that the citizens objecting to being taken over by the Communist Party of China in league with the globalist elite are fighting back, will fight back and will dominate. They will win. During the war, things are going to be very, very strange. But this is an irregular war because we won't want to fight the way they think we want to fight. So they're anticipating violence, violence in the street, riots, that sort of thing. They probably are expecting some level of civil disobedience, but I don't think their thinking really is extended much beyond that in terms of anticipating what the citizenry may do. So if one were to conceive of things here, and I'm talking about generally about the West, okay? So the same situation is just simply more extreme and has a different accent in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or Great Britain or Europe, right? But it's basically the same situation as exists here in the United States. And that is that we have a captured hierarchy. The institutions are captured. Population is not. Population is not dominated. Mostly, the population doesn't know it's under attack. It doesn't know its institutions, or until this year, had not known that its institutions were co-opted and captured, et cetera, et cetera. Now that the population does know this, there's a giant level of pushback ongoing. This is the irregular warfare of the people versus the deep state. And so the deep state is the face of fascism within the probably all of the Americas, but within the continental United States, or within the United States and Canada. The deep state can be defined as those people that are not voted in and that are there all the time and that make policy where legislators make law. And so the legislature may make a law that says you can't teach critical race theory, but some permanent deep state guy in the Department of Education takes that one law and makes 99 regulations about it that totally change its meaning. And so the deep state is the enemy. They are the enemy class. They are there perpetually. They don't owe their allegiance to the population. They have no fear of the population because the population never sees them. They are the fascist bureaucracy that causes the population problems at the Department of Motor Vehicles or the IRS or this kind of thing, right? And so the deep state, Department of Justice, all of these things, is captured and under the control of Wokean progressive communists that are in league with the Chinese Communist Party. And they're currently attempting to take over 100% the entire United States. And this irregular warfare has erupted this year. It's been ongoing for a number of years to increasingly larger percentages of the population. In the year 2020, we had a big jump of the number of people that were aware that they were at war with the CCP. This occurred because of the Chinese Communist Party unleashing the COVID primarily on their own population and having it spread over here. And then the globalists did the rest by ginning up the pandemic based on the reaction of the Chinese population to the COVID. And it didn't really exist here as such, but it was a theater, a giant theater, and they control the media, so they control the discourse, and ergo, they think they control all of it. But now, we've got a situation of irregular warfare, where the population is leaving the powers that be, the globalists, the federal government, the political parties, the central bank. The populace is leaving all of these institutions and simply paying less and less and less attention to them, turning their attention away from them. Deprived of attention, they will collapse. It's not really a case of if you don't pay attention to them, they're going to come out and take you over. If you get all the people to just simply not pay any attention to these guys, they will simply fold. It's now got to the point where they know they're collapsing and they're fighting furiously. The deep state is fighting furiously to maintain attention on themselves the way that they want, to drive the narrative and all this, and it is continuing to fail. This is causing them some great degree of difficulty. And we're approaching a crux point here in July, and that's the deep state panic. Okay, so we're going to have the deep state. The reason we put the brackets around it, these are square brackets. You use them. I used to use them all the time in my Alta reports, but they were annoying to people that had text to speech that would listen to the reports, the people that were blind. And so I took them out, but because it would say square bracket, then say the word, and then closing square bracket. But anyway, the reason we put the square brackets around DS for deep state is that those are called the kill box in Q parlance. I never talk about Q much, but I'm quite aware of it. There's reasons that I didn't want to talk about it. Anyway, so the deep state's going to be in panic in July. And part of that panic is going to be exacerbated by the central banks pumping out all kinds of money that's going to cause the FOMO into cryptos and the FOMO into gold and silver and all different other kinds of economic upheaval. Okay, not like collapse, not like economic collapse, but like upheaval in the sense of, you know, you've got a bunch of stuff on a blanket and people are whipping the blanket up and down with the by pulling and tugging on the corners. So nothing's just going to be too stable. Anyway, so the deep state is going to be panicking over this the month of July, and in August we get change. Now, as the deep state panics, and that we get in deeper into the irregular warfare, I wanted to discuss the idea of Aikido. Okay, Aikido. It's a martial art. Aikido. Okay, 3 syllables. Do meaning way, Aiki meaning harmony with life. I meaning AI, there meaning harmony, and Ki means life force. And so it's frequently translated as mind-body harmony or whatever, but I think of it as Aiki because I've also studied Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, which is just the hard martial art aspect of it without the intent for it to become a way of meditation. Do means way to the path to enlightenment. And so a dojo, jo means place, it also means stick. So you have a fighting stick. And wherever you put your stick is your home, ergo jo meant home or place. Dojo meant place of the way, the place you would go to, the home you went to practice your path to enlightenment. Anyway, so we're in this irregular war. And in irregular war, there's regular armies, there's generals, you know, there's commanders in chief, all of this kind of stuff. And then there are what are known as the irregulars. And that's because the irregulars are participants of will and of choice. They're not bound by an oath or a contract, so they're not bound by any formal oath to protect the Constitution. But in this case, many people within the population are in fact constitutionalists because that's what they're doing. They're acting in their own choice, from their own choice and in their own will, and they're expressing the fact that they are supportive of the Constitution. And they're doing it in many different ways. And so this is part of the irregular warfare. And all of this is just driving the deep state crazy. The reason that this is important to discuss now is because say that you were, that you knew that the deep state was going to panic. And you're thinking, oh, cool. You know, I like this idea, the deep state panicking. And in fact, hey, what can I do to help? Well, in my way of Aikido, harmonization with life force, one could make themselves an irregular. One could, by their choice and by their will, decide to participate actively in harrying, not harassing, not harassing, but harrying the deep state. Harrying is used to be the principal tactic in guerrilla warfare. And the harrying of a body of troops is random, just one-off shots and attacks on them as they are moving or going about their day. So if the troops are in transit, you harry them by sniping at them, basically, causing problems for them. Felling a tree across the road at an inappropriate time. Removing 2 braces underneath a small bridge so that their vehicles cause the bridge to collapse. It isn't going to cause them, it may kill someone in that case, but it isn't going to cause them too much damage. It will cause them constant casualty and maintenance issues if you do your harrying right. Your goal is not to, in harrying, your goal is to not be damaged. Okay, because you are a valuable irregular, you can continue to cause the deep state, in this case the enemy class, damage as long as you can harry them. So you don't want to get caught. You don't want to ever escalate it up to the point where you become anything that they are going to focus on, right? You don't want to end up in the deep state jails anywhere. Your point is to just be harmonizing with the general idea that everybody's getting on the case of the deep state, and you want to participate in that. And you're going to harmonize by just being a pain in the ass, an obstructionist, a refusenik, a slowdown, right? So you could harry the deep state if, for instance, you were at a food outlet, right? You know, a Starbucks or a sandwich shop or something like this, and somebody from the Democratic Party comes on in and they got a big food order. You can harry them by doing your job absolutely perfectly. You don't want to poison them. You don't in any way want to cause them anything, any kind of actions that could trigger any kind of an actual response. That's the goal, see, is to not get to that level. So you don't want to poison them. You don't want to fuck with their food. You want to do your job as best you can in delivering their food to them. Even if you have to steam that milk 5 times because you think you saw something in it, and it takes 25 minutes to do 1 cup of coffee, you know, that is harrying. You're causing them damage by cutting into their time, by taking away their focus, by irritating their emotions, by getting their guts all in an uproar. So you don't want to poison them. That's what I'm saying. You don't want to do that. You give them a good, very perfectly made sandwich. A perfectly made sandwich that takes you 5 times longer to make than any other sandwich you've ever made. That sort of thing, right? And so that is harrying. And so the deep state is going to be harried now because they're going to find themselves constantly pecked at and harassed by ordinary citizens that don't know that they're part of the deep state's problem. These ordinary citizens are just bitching about the critical race theory being taught to their kids, or just bitching about you know, their 6-year-old daughter having to look at some guy's penis in a swimming facility because he identifies as female, right? And so they're just not going to be taking it anymore. They're going to raise these levels. They're going to escalate all of these kinds of attacks against the deep state. They're just pushing back because everybody is pushing back, and it's culturally acceptable to push back. And it's going to be more so as we go forward through this summer. And so we're going to get to a state of panic for the deep state. And the panic for the deep state is going to be within that kill box. That's the definition of those brackets in Q Talk. And but the panic won't be felt by anybody that we will be able to see, us humans, right? We don't ever get to see the deep state. We just get to see some occasional images of some of their face people online. We'll never see the panic in the Rockefellers. We'll never see the panic in the banksters, right? We'll never see the panic in the actual people that pull the strings of the politicians. But they'll feel it this year. They'll feel it in July, because everybody in the cage, in the functioning cage of being an employee of the deep state, is going to feel that pushback. And then in addition to that, everybody in the cage of working for the deep state, at least insofar as in the United States and probably most of the Western republics, is going to also be feeling the same kind of energies and effects that the regular population has. So you've got somebody who's working right now in the DMV, and that person is pissed that their kid's being taught critical race theory. They're pissed that Joe Biden is making them go through woke racian race training, right? And so they're going to take that irritation out on the customers. But then in a little while, it will occur to them, you know, the people that they're dealing with at the DMV are not their enemies. Their enemies are their supervisors, and their supervisors' supervisors, and those fuckers on the other side of them. And so they'll do things to fuck the system over. Maybe they'll just start accommodating and saying, sure, no problem. Got your license, you know, yanked by the cops? Here, let me just make you another one. Fuck them. We'll just change one letter and that'll get it right through the system, or make this number different, whatever. They know how to work the system. So you see a lot of that. You're going to see this systemic, positive corrosion occur or crumbling occur. Because what's going to crumble is what's going to corrode are the constraints on the people that work for the deep state. They're going to just stop obeying the rules, okay? Doesn't mean they're going to be unlawful, but because rules structure us. There are very few laws, giant masses of rules. And so that's going to go away first. All the rules have to be gone, and they're already crumbling right now. And the deep state, bear in mind, that poor bastard in the DMV, he's the same way as you. Price of everything's going up. He's having a hard time getting shit. Supply chains are shutting down all over, you know, and he's got all this COVID shit and all the anxiety about the vaccines, all of this kind of crap, right? Don't take the vaccines, by the way. You know, research those fuckers and you find out that they're deadly. They are quite actually, it's a crapshoot. It is vaccine roulette. And that's what we need to do, by the way, is to, somebody should do a meme of a fellow playing vaccine roulette with a big gun full of hypodermics, because that's what it is. You're going to get maybe 1 person out of 6 that does not suffer major damage. And the question is, really, a lot of people are suffering major damage now, but the question is what's going to happen this fall and later as we go forward. But you're seeing the harassing and the harrying of the deep state now as the lawsuits come out, as the doctors start bitching and turning on them. A lot of doctors are saying to the hospitals, fuck it, I'm not doing this shit. You can fire me or whatever. So this irregular warfare is bringing up this idea of harmonizing over this summer. And so, like you're watching these videos, you're aware, you're not a normie, you've got some sense about you, but now you've got some energy, you're young, you want to participate, right? You want to participate in what is the greatest cultural revolution this planet has ever seen. Humanity is being changed, not just like Mao's Cultural Revolution when he destroyed China and sent China back 40 years. Nothing like that, right? That was 1 billion people involved, almost 1 billion people involved in that. This is going to be 7 billion people. 7 billion people are going to be involved in a cultural revolution that's starting this summer and will go for decades, because it's going to take a long time to reach every area on this sphere, right? And so it'll take a long time to penetrate down to everybody. But it's beginning in seriousness this year. And we are reaffirming and reinstituting and redefining the constitutional contract between the people and the governing people in our social order in the United States this year and onward. That process will take us some time, but it is also going to be occurring in a lot of other places all around the planet. This cultural revolution is going to be huge. In London, you see it. If you live in London, you're seeing a cultural revolution in front of your eyes. That's coming to the United States. It's going to come to Australia. Liberation is at hand. But we still have to do the barricades. We still have to do the fighting. But now it is certain we shall win, because we have enough people. We've crossed the Rubicon. We've crossed the threshold of enough people aware and awake and activated that war is begun now. And this war is not going to be fought the way the deep state wants to, with bullets and airplanes and all of that kind of shit, right? So we're going to pull all of those things away from them. Biden thinks that he can command somebody in an F-15 to go and shoot Americans and bomb Americans. We'll see if that can actually happen or not. So Biden is not protected by F-15s. The government is not protected by F-15s and nuclear bombs, right? The government actually is captive to those F-15s and nuclear bombs because it has to maintain security over them. If it felt that those things were threatened, it would have to add more and more and more and more and more and more resources to them. So let one F-15 be sabotaged on a runway somewhere, and look at what's going to happen to Biden's government and his military in terms of how many of his Wokians he's going to have to put out there to protect the assets that he thinks that maybe he could cause harm to Americans with. This is not going to happen that way. So we're doing an irregular warfare. This irregular warfare is everyone against the deep state, but you need not participate. Okay, I'm not asking you to do so. I'm just saying that I'm just giving you some suggestions should you feel motivated to do so. And these suggestions are intended to keep you safe as possible during the period of time that you acquire some skills in warfare. That's a very difficult task. Most people die in war in their early exposure to it. Okay, that's when you make the mistakes, And so in this period of time of this irregular warfare, remember that there are guiding principles. Don't stick your head up, right? So if you're going to do anything, do it surreptitiously. Smart. Think before you take any action. Frequently, a word is more powerful than any other kind of action. So you need not be aggressive or violent. In fact, violence is explicitly not to be used. Anger, sure. Outrage, any of the other emotions, you're offended, you're voicing your offense, whatever. Your mere aggravation of the people in the deep state cages that are working for the deep state will do the job. So all you have to do is go about your day and not take shit from people from the deep state. And you will have caused a great deal of anxiety and trouble for the deep state, and will continue to do so as long as you maintain that attitude. And as Gandhi says, every action is insignificant, but every action is absolutely vital. And so any given action is insignificant, but any given action is absolutely vital. And so in this irregular warfare, that's the approach, right? To just simply be smart and not take shit from people. And then as you get skills, you can, maybe you can get to the point where you can file a lawsuit on your own. You don't want to hire an attorney because that plays into their system. You want to cause attorneys to be hired, resources to be taken away from them by filing the lawsuit on your own. Here's something. The court system is set up to provide pro se. The court uses Latin, for the most part, legal Latin, medicine, Greek. Okay, so in Latin, pro se means for self. And so if you file for yourself, the court is set up because they are legally obligated to do that. They're set up to provide you all kinds of fucking help in getting your lawsuit to be effective. So you can start off as a numbnuts, as an absolute noob, and you can walk your way through with the resources that the court provides. Just be slow and methodical about it and sue the fuckers. Doesn't cost you anything other than the $32 to file, the occasional copy fees, the occasional fees to get some bit of evidence you have to put into your document, and so on, right? And if you get your document wrong, the court is set up to help you fix it, to cure your problems in suing them. So this whole system is set up in your favor as pro se to suck resources out of the deep state and turn them around and get back at the deep state. Should you decide you wanted to do lawfare, right? Warfare practice by law as opposed to weapons. So anyway, we're getting into the FOMO and the panic in July. And I wanted to point something out before we got in there. And that is that, as I say, it's my understanding that the Mantids created communism, or are expressing communism in humans. Communism is an ideology. It was written up in whole cloth by Karl Marx. And it's not organic. It does not derive from communalism as practiced by tribal societies. It's entirely different. It's a power structure thing. And it is exactly how the Mantids are organized. Now, so there's guys out there that are saying that they're super soldiers and that they've been off-world fighting people, fighting the intergalactic slavers, or they're intuitive empaths, and they've been, helping in negotiations with the blue space chicken guys and all this kind of stuff, right? And 99.99999, 5 nines or 55 nines, whatever. Almost all of it is bullshit. It's fake. It's stuff out of their heads and so on. It is not a valid claim. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm a super soldier, and I'm going to say, okay, show me something, right? Show me your art, and demonstrate to me in fact now, in behavior now, some skill or something that I can say, okay, that is above and beyond what a normal human would have. And so I may attack you. I may get a blade and try and chop off your arm. And if you don't get your arm chopped off, well, hey, you may have some skills, right? It's a little bit harsh, but you get my point. Okay, so in that sense, so I like demonstrable, factual stuff. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of a guy. And so I'm going to make a statement that is not a claim, or it is a claim in a way. In a legal sense, it's a claim. And so I'm going to say, just as Corey Goode said that he had recovered memories from some kind of a tooth pulling or something, and discovered that he'd been in the secret space program. And I hear Michael Jacko is that way now too, that he's got some kind of recovered memory and this sort of shit. It's like, okay, that's fine, guys. But factually, I am an interdimensional traveler. Factually, I have traveled interdimensionally. I could do it now. I could do it tomorrow if I chose. And I can repeat this. And I can go to these other dimensions and I can bring things back as proof that I've been there. It may be possible for me to take others with me. I don't know. I've never tried. But I am an interdimensional traveler, and I've been to other dimensions. Now, in normie world, in the deep state world, well, the deep state, no, let's take them out of there. Okay, so if I were to go to a church and make this claim, I'd stand up in a church on a Sunday where they've done their preaching, or go to a mosque and stand up on after the services there on the Friday and say, okay, I'm an interdimensional space traveler, and I can prove it. What do you want to know? And you're going to get a different kind of a reaction, but it is essentially the same kind of a claim that is made by all of the bogus woo-woo guys, but I'm saying it as I have a method for doing it. I can show you this method. I can show you factually stuff that I've brought back. I can discuss the state of being in the other dimension intelligently. I'm not doing a TV show where I'm saying thus and so happened, and I'm talking about personalities and Gonzalez and all of this other shit, and Mayans floating around in stone spaceships. No, but I am saying that I've taken psychedelic drugs and I've traveled interdimensionally using shamanic levels of psychedelic drugs. Now, be advised, shamanic levels are usually thought of for mushrooms at about 25 wet grams or higher, or maybe 9 dry grams or higher. And I've done those levels. And so I've traveled interdimensionally. And there is no difference in my traveling interdimensionally than what we are experiencing as humans as others travel here, in the sense that of the reporting. So in other words, when I take the mushrooms, it's a 7 or 8 hour to 12-hour journey. It's better than DMT, because DMT plows you there, but it strips so much of rationality away that you're not able to get much out of the experience, and it's very brief. So I didn't like DMT. It never got me anything going there, coming back. And I've brought stuff back that allowed me to do my WebBot software, allowed me to program the emotional reduction engine. All of these different kinds of understanding have occurred because of these interdimensional travels, and because of the people I met on the other end of those interdimensional travels and the discussions that we had had. Now, in DMT, so like Joe Rogan has taken DMT and he's probably gone to the same area of hyperspace that I have. And now, so I will tell you that when you take DMT, as opposed to mushrooms, it creeps up on you in mushrooms. Take mushrooms, go lie down, smoke some pot, and maybe 2 or 3 hours later, if you have the ability and the skill, you can pop over. And from then on, it's that same sort of mushroom mellowness, okay? The same thing with mescaline. It is not the harshness of DMT. It's not that destructive tearing of the soul and shredding of your attachment to the body that forces you into hyperspace. When that happens, so like Joe Rogan, he takes DMT, he goes there, he's in the same area of hyperspace, and it is a giant moving of everything, because basically your isolated consciousness is shoved into a greater mass of consciousness within the stream, okay, within the pulse. And it is this giant mass of consciousness that you interact with in hyperspace. When you pop into there, it is just like a spaceship popping into this reality. You're just suddenly there, there's no transition, you don't scream in from, you know, with DMT anyway, from a high altitude, you're just there, you're just shoved in there. With DMT and with the mushrooms and mescaline, synthetics like, you know, the phenylamines, LSD, they can maybe get you there. I don't think they're very successful in doing so. I think there's moderating chemicals in DMT and in mescaline mushrooms that do it in a way that synthetics cannot. But in any event, when you get there, you are basically have to understand that the reason that you cannot communicate, especially with DMT, in a meaningful fashion is that you didn't bring your body with you, and you did not bring rationale and reason with you, your reason and rationality. What you did bring was observation and awareness and some ability to communicate, especially with the DMT. But here's the thing. So if you look at the environment around you, imagine that would be hyperspace. And then in hyperspace, because it is your consciousness still discretely held to itself, self-clinging, self-contained, that consciousness is shoved into a giant stream of consciousness that you have to make some sense out of, that you have to come on in and say, this is a reality. What is it? But because it's consciousness, you can do things to make it firm up. So if you decided that sort of yellowy color going by was a river, you could focus on it and make it look more like a river, and it would oblige, and it would show more river-like characteristics to you. It would still be a little weird because the stones would be singing to themselves at the bottom of that river, and the fishes would be accompanying by a guitar, but it would nonetheless have more river-like characteristics. In DMT, this is just not possible because you don't bring enough of your reason with you to try and force these things through your particular area of consciousness into the less than firm consciousness around you, the malleable consciousness that's trying to communicate with you. But it's like the air there. You breathe, but the air is talking to you as you're as you're breathing in and out. So it's speaking to itself and doing other things that you have no idea what's going on. It is truly a remarkable reality, and it is much more real than anything here. Much more real. And you learn things if you know what you're doing and you're skilled. Most people don't they don't learn things because they're not skilled. Okay, they don't understand the nature of the psychedelic experience. They take it for recreation or you know, psychological issues, and there are other layers to it. In any event, though, so when I did interdimensional travel, the very first time that I ever opened that door, because I'd taken all kinds of psychedelics, and it was like, you know, psychological and so on, but it was never a journey. And then one day I'd taken enough of the it was actually mushrooms the first time. Thereafter, I concentrated on mescaline for a while because mescaline I found to be an easier entrance. But then the ability to get mescaline faded. In any event, though, so but the first time that I went there, I opened up the door in consciousness, the doors to perception that Aldous Huxley talks about, and I stepped into a place. This was hyperspace, and there I encountered the Mantids, and a Mantid, a senior old scientist Mantid, and I was flummoxed, absolutely flummoxed. Now, I did not understand at that time that I did not have a body, that I wasn't projecting a body out, what I was just a sphere. The most efficient shape in all of universe, in all of materium, and all of consciousness is a sphere. So you go back to being a sphere whenever you're not trying to project any other shape. Anyway, so I show up in this Mantids place, and it's basically a consciousness research lab. All right, and very much this guy was a Mantid scientist. That was his role, and he was very, 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 or it has no sex that way, has no sex or gender. I think of them all as he. There were a couple that were clearly beta personalities, right? Whether they were female or male made no difference. They were simply betas. Anyway, so my encounter with him, I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about the nature of the Mantids, the nature of their fucking around with other life forms, and some of the nature of how they are structured. And they are truly an insect. They don't really look like a mantid with the abdomen back. They look much more like an ant. He was able to, because they live and do things in consciousness, to them it's literally like just opening up a door to your outdoor experimentation shop and going out there, right? They don't have to do anything to their bodies. When I finally got skill, I was able to express a more or less hominid form. My face was probably just basically a blank, because your mind is so occupied with everything else going on around you, you don't put the energy into maintaining your shape. And it takes a lot of energy when you're in consciousness. It's easier just to sag and let yourself go back to being a sphere and just go back to the fantastic experience of observation. Anyway, so I learned a lot about the Mantids. And in my interactions with them, they were very pissed at me. This guy was really pissed at me and tried to get rid of me and stuff, right? And he blew me out of that area and back in my psychedelic experience, back into my body with his mind. That got me really angry. And so I jumped right back at him, screaming. Just the nature of where I was at that time and my age and so on, I was very aggressive. And so I do that, and I discovered a whole lot of stuff by its interaction with me after that. Because turns out, if I hardened myself, he couldn't kick me out. If I was aware and focused on him, he couldn't kick me out. I could actually cause things to have problems for him in his experiments. So I was aggressive and irritating, and he was extremely nonplussed. They don't have emotions like us, okay? So Mantids, reptiles, they don't have emotions like us, all right? Any of these other beings. It all has to, I met this one guy who does have emotions. They're much more advanced than us, I think. Their emotions are so finely tuned that that's their art form. And this other guy was a hominid. He displayed himself in just pristine elegance as a hominid, and we were able to communicate. You can't say talking. I'm not sure that he even had ears per se that heard phonemes. So I was never try to communicate my name because it would be meaningless to him. I wouldn't know if he could even hear. And so here I would be describing a cliff or a precipice or something like that. And what does it mean to him? You know, he wouldn't know that I was applying it to myself. Communication is extremely difficult at that level. Thus, I became a linguist as a result of these experiments, as a result of these experiences. Anyway, though, so I met this guy, and he was a very nice fellow. His skin was sort of a dusty kind of a pale yellow, and up above the skin hovered all of his emotions in just brilliant color. And I got the impression that it was ever so much more elegant back where he came from in his physical planet. And this was the best he could do mentally. And in his world, there were people that were, you know, very elegant emoters and could paint with their emotions all over their body. And they didn't have clothing such as we have because it would interfere with the emotional things here. Anyways, a long story. I met him repeatedly in hyperspace. He taught me things. And I was a good student. He was senpai to kohai, senior student to new student. And so I learned from him, and we did things like we made arrangements to meet there. And that's a difficult thing. Difficult conversation to even have about that. But anyway, so I learned about the Mantids, and I learned that this fellow too, whatever he was, whatever his name was, whatever the place he came from was, And he didn't try and tell me his name. He was just the square-headed fellow, the painted skin fellow. And they were having climate change on their planet. Psychedelics on their planet were a technology to get them to consciousness such that they could search for solutions. He was searching for a solution to the climate change problems that they were having. And I told him about paint. They'd never thought of, because of the nature of their being, where they want to express everything, they didn't even really wear clothes. They had clothing, but their climate, until recently apparently, had been so benign that they didn't have to worry about such things, right? Much. But so they didn't have the idea of a sacrifice layer of paint on a structure. And they were having dust storms and things that were causing erosion and causing problems. So I told them about chemicals, basically, and man, that was a bitch. I actually had to come back, a diversion here, I had to come back from those episodes, recover my personality, and go and learn about how paint was made, and then figure out how I was going to express this in a place where there was no words, but you would put the words into your head and they would pop out as images or things or plants or whatever the fuck in hyperspace, because you're dealing with consciousness at a direct level. And it worked. He got the idea and he took off. And then we met later, and he came back and assured me that it indeed had been successful for his civilization to discover the idea of a sacrificial surface layer. And it was the concept that they'd never even considered. The idea of the chemicals and putting it together in paint and so forth. Once I got just one little idea about the kind of chemical and so forth, I'm certain they could do it on their own. They were very advanced, but they just never had that concept. So if you grow up on a planet without water, you're not ever going to learn to swim, right? So anyway, so he taught me a lot of stuff, and they had fought the Mantids. Okay, they had kicked the Mantids off their planet. The Mantids may be what we call archons here on Earth in ancient times, because these guys don't work through walking around physically, even though they are physical, and they may indeed be able to come here physically, but they work through this media of consciousness. And to them, the perfect society, the perfect order is what they have. And they fear that that's really the only emotion that they have, okay? They have irritation, they have sort of like placid satisfaction, but they don't have any big ups and they don't have any big lows in emotions, because they don't have a central nervous system the way we do. And even beyond that, they don't have a vagus nervous system, which is where all of our emotions come from. I learned this from the painted skin fellow, the emotionally painted skin fellow. And he taught me so much about the vagus nervous system. That was what he was attempting to get across to me, was what we are and how to deal with things as a hominid in the materium, and how to interact with this technology of being able to go to consciousness and seek. Anyway, though, so I learned, and I did things, and we met, and he taught me stuff. He paid me back repeatedly for the single idea of the paint. He was very grateful about that. And I got much more out of him than I had given him, I'm quite certain. Anyway, though, so I am reminded that communism is exactly the way that the Mantids work. Now, the Mantids are insects, and they're very predictable kind of an insect. So the mantid I was looking at, that I was interacting with at first, was this big fucker. And the older they are, the bigger they get. They physically have to shed their body and keep growing, right? But their minds don't grow. They fear, and they fear us. And what they really fear is not us, but they fear all species, all beings that can individually learn. And so their social order is entirely communistic. It is entirely a dictatorship, and it is entirely a scientific dictatorship, and it is entirely structured, and it is bred into them, and they could not rebel against it if they tried. And the weird parts of it for us are that as an individual, this scientist, who is very old, is basically learned no more stuff. He's done lots of experiments and so forth, But here's the weird part about it. That old scientist was doing them at the direction of what I took to be an immature mantid, a kid, okay? But the old scientist was doing the work for the young mantid because the young mantid had just hatched. And in Mantid world, that meant that the young mantid knew more than the old mantid did, and that knew more than the old mantid ever would. Because here's the thing, with these insects, they literally put their brains and their knowledge into them while they are in the egg. And when they hatch, they have all of that knowledge instantly. They don't have, so their strategy does not require being an infant, doesn't require being a toddler, doesn't require going to school or any of that. They don't do any of those kind of things. It's a huge jump, a huge savings of time to do it this way, but it has this very fatal flaw. And the very fatal flaw is, in order for them to learn anything new, which is just excruciatingly difficult for any of the adults, they can. I mean, they're not without that capability, but it is not easy nor native nor natural for them, and there's no mechanism within their ability to connect to. We don't store our memories and stuff in our brains. It's an antenna that connects it to the larger consciousness. And the mantids don't have that. They don't have that ability to have neuroplasticity and make new connections. It is extremely difficult for them because of the rigidity and the nature of their body mainly. Anyway, so the mantids operate on this dominance hierarchy that's all power, and it's all powerful scientists that are instantly all powerful as soon as they're hatched. Now they have to go through sort of a hardening of the body stage, and so they're not effective, but they start barking out orders as soon as these fuckers are out of that egg case. And all the other mantids just accept it, just pick up on it. And that's the nature of the mantid society. And so if they need to learn something, if they collectively go through this process and decide that they needed to learn something, they get to this, basically what they do is they program themselves. They know how to program themselves, even though they can't acquire the knowledge themselves in the body now. They can program new knowledge into other mantids without having to know what that knowledge is. I can explain it, but I don't need to take the time at this point. So basically they do a chemical bath on the eggs, they give knowledge to the being that way, and then the being hatches and it's in charge. And so it's the new Joe Biden, right? So it's the new head communist. And so it runs around and it gives you orders. Now, this is the ultimate in authoritarian, structured, non-changing societies. And the mantids fear beings like us. It's, as I say, it is their only emotion. It is a survival thing, just like with us. They have the ability to sense and feel fear. And that mantid I was interacting with, when I got pissed and blew right back in there, I made him afraid. I made him uncomfortable because of the skill, my nascent skill, the fact that I was a schizophrenic or whatever the fuck, gave me some ability with my will. And I'd been doing martial arts for some time by that point. I started at 11, so I've been doing them for at least 11 or 12 years. And so I had some mental skill, and I was really angry. And the filters were off. The psychedelics removed the filters, and so I just expressed it. And so he was afraid, or it was afraid. It reacted in fear. It tried to throw me out. And so there was this pushing and shoving thing, and I shoved it to the other side of its space, and it was all freaked out then, because I was new, and it knew I was new. They don't read your mind, but they read the waves that come off of you, okay? So they read the connecting waves, and they get impressions. Anyway, though, so it was freaked out. Now, I understood in its freaked outness, independent of later on being told this, but it validated it, the guy with the emotions over his skin. But it was freaked out over me because it knew instantly I learned from it. See, this is their fear. This is their big fear. They know shit. These things are ancient, hugely ancient, beyond our ability to understand ancient. And they know shit beyond our ability to grasp. But they're afraid because every time they do something, we can learn from it. And they know we can learn from it. They can't stop us from learning from it, but they still must react, knowing we're going to learn from it and do something different, and then they'll have to struggle and struggle and struggle to try and figure out how to react to our something different. They don't do well with different. They don't do well with change. These are the beings that instruct all of the other fuckers in the pantheon of UFO worlds, alien horrors, right? And all the other fuckers are controlled by the mantids. The reptiles are controlled because they have such a crude, very, very crude vagus nervous system that you can just tap into it with your mind and tell them turn left, turn right, that kind of shit, right? You can even pre-program it. You can put a bunch of instructions into their mind the way you would a robot, and it would just execute those things the way a computer would. But the mantids are behind it all, and they're hugely ancient. And they really are afraid, and their fear is growing. And they have as much fear in them as the deep state does, because the deep state can't control us, and it is exactly the same thing. Every move the deep state makes exposes them more, and we learn more. And this is exactly the same kind of thing. And the mantids have communism down pat. It's built into their bodies. When they hatch eggs, they hatch them into this system. And they're trying to impose that system on all other species. Now, Emotion Dude, he says that his people threw him off of the planet long time ago and had been progressing ever since. And that it was, and this is what he was trying to tell me with describing the emotions and the vagus nervous system and how key it was, especially the X nerve, nerve 10. 9 and 10 of the cranial nerves are tied into the vagus system in a very unique and very specific way. Again, the details are not meaningful to you at this point, but we have the ability, because of the way that the vagus nervous system is built within us, to be very superior to the mantids. And they are very much afraid of this, because we have the capability of mastery. Now, mastery is an interesting thing. So I consider myself a master of Aikido. Now, do I know all of the Aikido moves? No. Can I put Japanese names to all of them? No. I've done Aikido for 30 years, and I'm a white belt. And I'm a very, very, very good white belt. And I am a master of Aikido. I'm a master of Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Once you get mastery in one thing, some people will tumble to the idea of becoming masters of mastery. And then they'll take that ability to master something and they'll aim it at something else, shrink the time because they know how to do that, because they're a master at this other thing, and you apply these same principles, and they become a master at this thing. And so the more things you master as you go forward in your life, the easier it is to become a master of any of these things. Bearing in mind that the mantids are born with knowledge and will never, ever, ever know mastery. And to them, mastery is the ultimate prize. This is because mastery to them and to us is true magic, okay? It is a response of the physical environment and the executioners, the people executing the mastery, the sensei, the master. It is their body, their emotions, their knowledge, their thinking in that moment that demonstrates mastery. And it is done without a conscious application. That is to say, the master doesn't go out there and say, okay, right now in this moment, I'm going to demonstrate this particular mastery. No, you go and you do it. It flows, right? It's the flow. You get into the groove, and it's the peak experience. The mantids will never, ever, ever emotionally, they'll never have any of this. It's really, I feel very sad whenever I think about them. And I feel sorry for them because, well, they are as they are, and they are my enemy because of what they want to do to me, even though they don't do it out of malice, only are doing it out of their own fear. Nonetheless, they shall not do it to me, and I must fight them on this. And so they are the enemy and the ultimate head of the enemy class. but they are to be pitied because their experience in this life is so, in my opinion, so shallow and so sad and doomed. So the Mantids fear the master of anything, master chef, master gardeners, because they'll never be able to do any of that. And they recognize that that acquisition of mastery has demonstrated the actual movement of that individual from one level to a higher level. Now, bear in mind, they're born to the best they're ever going to be. Their first day is the best they're ever going to be. They're going to live a monstrously long life and deteriorate the entire time. Truly sad beings. But they are our enemy, and they're trying to oppress us with communism. They have the ability to manipulate consciousness. Their laboratories, they have physical laboratories, I'm quite sure. They have physical planets. Emotion Dude told me that they were physically repulsed from their complex of planets. These guys lived on 3 planets strung out in this solar system, and they had to actually physically fight the Mantids. They had to destroy the bugs. And it was not a good time for anyone, and it took a horrible toll on their social order across all 3 planets. And they were successful. I don't know length of time. Such things are difficult to get across in hyperspace. I don't know how long they fought them, but I know that this guy celebrates. They celebrate all the time this major success in getting the Mantids thrown out of their system. And it was at a cost of 100% death of the enemy, the Mantids. They don't surrender. You can't reform them. They can't be jailed because they have this ability to do things in consciousness. Just because you have their body even all strapped up doesn't mean that they're without power. And so you simply must eradicate them. And that alone, to this very intelligent, highly emotional species, one of the things he told me was that their entire species changed color from the agony of having to kill all of the Mantids to get them off the planet. And he couldn't tell me what color they were before, and he projected as best he could the color that he was now. And he's sort of, like I say, sort of a yellowish kind of color, dusty kind of a yellowish color. And I don't know what color they were before that. And he had hopes that over time that their change of color would return back to where they were, but that he recognized that this was a part of the universe, that there's always a cost. And you pay the cost, you pay the price the universe demands in order to accomplish. And so they accomplished, the Mantids are thrown out, but they themselves were changed. And so humanity is at this point now. We're having to throw off the Mantids. We can't see them because they're hidden from us, but they're nonetheless, they're pulling the strings for all of the enemy class. And they're manipulating the enemy class to do their will, not the enemy's will, but the Mantids' will. And it is their goal that we shall never have mastery, that we shall be one of the species that they keep perpetually under their, I don't know what you would call their digits. They're certainly not thumbs. And they fight all the time. So Mantids are constantly engaged all around the materium, all around the universe, so trying to suppress species capable of learning. And because we can, many of our species gain mastery, and they fear mastery, and they fear the woo, right? To them, this is all something they can never, ever, ever experience, and it must be repressed. And so we have, the echo of that here on our planet, because it makes no sense, all of the actions of the fascists and all of this kind of stuff at the top. And that's because those actions are not necessarily intended to make sense. They're not necessarily a sensible thing to do. And they're only being done because the Mantids are fucking with us. We're being fucked with at a very deep level. Now, this doesn't mean that you go off and you attack humans, right? Any human can be recovered, in my opinion, because we can all learn. And some humans will present themselves and demonstrate that they're not redeemable, and we'll have to figure out what we're going to do with them. But in the meantime, in this irregular war that we're fighting against communism here in the United States, against the global elitist communism across all of the Western hemispheres, the Western republics, and against the Mantids, who are probably deep in the earth, or somewhere in consciousness that they're looking down and controlling all of this. As we fight this war, remember, we can learn. We can do things. We can acquire knowledge. The enemy cannot. The enemy is rigid. The enemy must always react within specific parameters, even though at times they will be trepidatious about those reactions, about doing those things, because they know we're going to learn from them. And we'll figure out something else for them to have to try and figure out how to react to. And this is causing them a great deal of trouble. This deep state panic will be evident as we get into July. You'll see this in a lot of different ways. False flags are not necessarily out of the picture. We may be able to derail those. The central bank is losing control. A lot of the people that they usually bribe know the central bank is losing control. And so maybe false flags won't be as powerful as they've been able to be in the past. More and more people are waking up, more normies are out just looking around, seeing things. And so the more we're observant, because it's hard to do a false flag if you're watching every move. So if we knew, for instance, that they were going to do a false flag on January 6th, wouldn't you think that everybody would be like if we were all time travelers, we could go back to January 6th now, a few tens of thousands of us, and all have our cameras focused on those specific places that we needed to be just ahead of time, just when they were going to do their false flag. And so they run on in there and they're going to do their evil deed, and there's people around with cameras. Well, hey, they're probably not going to do it. So if we get to that level, if they know we're all watching them, and that there's a movement out there that is like, maybe we can get the Q people saying, hey guys, keep your eyes peeled. There's a false flag in the offing. Get your camera ready. See if you can capture it. Stay safe, but they're going to try and do it. And so if we actively go into alert, aware, observer mode, we can fuck their plans. We can come on in there and be irregulars. We can say, hey dude, can't be doing that unseen while I'm around. I'm going to stand right here. I'm not going to go and do my shopping. I'm going to stand right here and watch what you fuckers are doing. And I'm going to get my camera out because I don't think this is legit. And it has a huge impact, especially on the people that are now rattling in the kill box of the deep state. They know that's a kill box. The workers even know it. I see in the limited contact I have with the deep state way the fuck out here, when I do go in there, I see the jitteriness of all of these people that are at the level of having to actually execute the orders of the deep state. They don't like being there. They can sense that shit is coming. And it is indeed coming. So, harmonize with the effort. so I've got to go and do things. So this is for all of the people that are waking up and getting the itch, right? It's like, oh yeah, I've had some training. I'm a fighter. Nope. You're not going to slug anybody. You're not going to go and use your own poor emotion control. Take it out on some other human. You've got to be smarter than that. Our goal is to harry, to drive the deep state in ways it would not go, simply because we're down there gnawing at its feet as every time it steps down, right? That we're poking at it with little sticks, just enough to be irritating, make it move that way a bit, and then you withdraw, and then you go find some other place to go and poke them. And you just keep doing this, and you keep doing this, you keep doing this. We're going to wear the bastards down. Now you see why that warning out there, right? Anyway, so live long, live safe, live smart, live aware, and prosper.